Hey everybody, so I have had quite a few people ask me just the process that I went through to write my first book, which is Big Girl Decisions. I wrote a blog post about it, but I thought it'd be nice to actually have a video that I could just send people to watch the video. So this is how I created the book. Gotta bring all this fun stuff. Okay, so I was on a run. It was 6 months after I gave birth to Jackson, and I was just thinking about my experience and my journey to motherhood, and I just got overwhelmed with this feeling that I had to write my story. I didn't necessarily at the time know that it was going to be a book. I just knew I needed to write it down. So I realized the first thing I had to do, which is every writer's first rule, is to create an outline. And so that's what I did. I kind of spelled out all of the pieces of my story that I felt were important for the reader. And what I did was I spent the next probably like 9 months writing. I had a newborn, so that was fun. Basically, I wrote whenever, wherever I could. So Thomas and I, if you've followed me for a bit, then you know that Thomas and I, we alternate nights that we put the boys to bed. So every night that it was Thomas's turn, I busted out my laptop and I wrote for a good probably 2 hours. You know, I wrote in the airport, I wrote, a lot of places, but my fondest memory is writing at my kitchen counter in our old house. So, because that's where I did the majority of it. Oh, okay, here's a good one. Okay, so this one starts out, this was the first, oh, I'm just realizing what this is. This is the first manuscript I ever gave someone to read. And I gave it to Thomas to read because I see his handwriting in his notes on these Post-its. After he had looked at it and given me feedback, I wrote some more, and then I decided to give it to, I call them my mama posse. It was a bunch of women that are my friends, essentially. Some of them have a background in writing or communications or editing, and so I knew that they would be helpful. And then others knew me really well, because something that was really important to me in this book was to have it be as honest as possible. And so I gave it to my mama posse, and I got a lot of feedback. I did not want to talk about my religious background. I didn't want it to turn into any sort of religious piece whatsoever, so I kind of omitted that. And I also didn't talk much about my family growing up, because again, I just felt like that wasn't really the story. But I had a friend who's been a dear friend of mine for a very long time. She told me, you need to incorporate those things. If you've read the book, then you know that I have adopted siblings, and she felt so strongly that that could have been part of what played into my fear of motherhood, was coming from an unconventional family. I say that because I just don't feel like there's such a thing as a conventional family anymore. Family's the people who love you. So I added some stuff about my family's background and where I came from, and she also said I had to talk about the religion, because there were a lot of things that I didn't realize at the time, some belief systems that I developed because of my religious upbringing. After my mom posse, I had 4 or 5 people read it. I took all of their feedback, and then I spent about another 2 months writing more. After all of that, I realized now it comes to a point where shit's about to get real. And so the next step I took was hiring a professional editor and a graphic designer. Now, that's where this little handy bin comes in. So I went back and forth with my editor. I have to show you the difference. Okay, so this is the manuscript, one of the mama manuscripts. And then I got all official by putting a title page on. One thing that I've learned with the editing process, besides the amount of time, is that you really need to communicate to your editor what it is that you're wanting. So I just kind of, we came up with a price and some hours and a contract that I signed, and I said, just edit it. I'm thinking, you're the professional, you edit this. I just knew that I couldn't be the editor as I was the writer. So one of the things you want to focus on with your editor is, what I suggest is having them first start with a macro edit. So looking for things such as, you know, the book flows with the overall theme of the book, and the chapters all play into that overall theme and they build on one another. And then looking for things like transition sentences and transitioning from one chapter to the next, and just making sure that that story really flows well in that sense from a macro level. And then once that edit is done and you've made your revisions to it, then have your editor go through and do a micro edit. And that's things like sentence structure and grammar and spelling and all of those things that I think we tend to think about with editing. I wish I would have known that going in, because the macro stuff, it just didn't really occur to me. As I was writing, I was like, oh, you know, I didn't really think of my story in terms of a theme. I just thought, oh, this is just my story and I'm telling it. But then as I was going through that editing process, I realized there is a theme here. At first, I thought it was more of my way of expressing the experience that I had with a miscarriage. But then I realized there was so much more than that. The true theme to my book was this love, whether it was the love I already had or the love that I hadn't experienced yet that was completely terrifying me. And so once I made that connection, it was really easy for me to see how all of the chapters needed to flow together, and all of the little stories that I told within each chapter needed to flow and have purpose. So definitely do the macro edit first and then go into the micro. I wish I had, I don't know if I do, but okay, so I hired a graphic designer, and I don't think I have it in here. Okay, so these were the options for the cover. So this is one, and you can see where there are like some icons. That's kind of where the concept of the icons inside the book came from. And then you can see, so here was an option, and we actually took like that title part and added that to the final version. These were all the ones that people voted on. A lot of people liked the pots. Yeah, so these were all just the different options that like these were kind of the inspiration, and then these were the different options that the designer came up with. Can I just say, people, I did not want my face on this book. I just didn't. I did not want it. We had 4 different cover options, and I specifically told the graphic designer I did not want my photo. And when she gave me this option, she said, I know this isn't what you asked, but I think it's extremely relatable, and I think you need to consider using it. The next stage, and this was, I did this during the editing process, but I took all of the possible covers and I put them online, and I asked people to vote for them. I took them around my office. I asked people to vote for their favorite and tell me what they liked about it. All my friends and family, I did the same thing, and people, this one by a landslide, which is why I used it. And you know, I mean, the only way, I mean, I do like it because it's comedic. I'm okay with it because it's comedic. But a lot of what people said about it was it's relatable. When I think of a mom, this is the face I think about, you know, like this type of expression. And so I ended up going with that. And we did some tweaks to it. This part, this element right here, the actual title, was from a different cover, and so we kind of did a hybrid. And then she laid it out. This was actually an option, these icons, which represent different parts of the book. So she laid it out, and we had to talk about, you'll see this was highlighted from my launch party, my speech, but like this little design too, I had her add that in, and then of course like the cover and everything. Once it was completely edited and I felt good about moving forward, and once I had it, the cover chosen, then I had the graphic designer lay it out in the actual layout that it needed to go to print. So that's with the margins, with the page numbers, the titles, the chapter titles, all of that stuff. That was laid out, and then I had a proof printed so I could see it. And once that was approved, then I got on Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing, and I self-published. And the platform's not very difficult. You basically submit the cover work, a PDF of the work. Oh, and that's one thing I forgot to mention. I also copyrighted this before I put it on Kindle. So you'll see in any beginning pages of a book, you'll see that you have the Library of Congress number. You get that once you use the KDP, the Kindle Publishing, Kindle Direct. Publishing. But I added the copyright number and then, you know, all the good copyright stuff that you need in there. And the acknowledgements of my editor and graphic designer. Then I put it up on Amazon, and then I worked my fanny off to promote it. I hope that gives you some insight into the process that I went through to make this book. And if you are in the process of making a book and need help, please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to do graphic design stuff, editing. I'm definitely willing to help out, so please reach out. And let me know if you have any questions. Hopefully this answered some of the questions that you may have about how I published my book.